Okay, good morning, alle Yiddish Kinder. Good morning to all of you. It is Sunday morning, Chav Beis Sivan. And we're learning the Maimer B'Shoresh Ha'ekdimu Yisrael L'Nasa L'Nishma Tafshin Yud Gimel, which means we're doing a Maimer of Shavuos, even though we're closer to the end of the month of Sivan. We're doing Maimed every day. That's what we've been doing, Mitzvah Hashem. And therefore we've had a lot of time to do supplemental Maimorim. Last week we did the Maimed from Tafshin Yud Beis. No, last week we did the Maimed from Yud Gimel. The Maimed of Bechukaisai from Tafshin Yud Gimel, about Parsois. Very interesting series of classes. Last week, Friday, there was no class. I've been preoccupied with some personal stuff. I just want to say that the Shiurim going forward for Aschus for Shlema, for Abba Ben Risha. That's my father. Zolzan Gesund. He's Baruch Hashem, getting better. And we're looking forward to the Fuah Shlema. I'm apologizing for why there was no class on Friday and there was no Fabrengen Thursday night. I am a human being. We're going to be learning my Maimorim now in the mornings. In other words, we finished Kuf Yates, which is an amazing accomplishment. Thursday we did Ois Tov. And we finish with I can't get my mind off that pasuk. That after you speak about all the high madreges of Terasa Yom Nosei and a Chosed Am Chasedim Kainei and a Chasedim Kandalei, what's the end of it all? Hakoil Kipsoyim Etli Yizbarach Nechte Asmusam Hus. The biggest Chosed and the biggest Tzaddik is a lost sheep. And he says to the Eibishter, Bakesh Avdecha, look for me. And of course, alternatively, what says in the Gemara, and it's brought in Rambam and in Chasidus, that Tefticha Yisrael, the save Galus on Eisin Shuva, Umayadein Golin, that Keisi Kese Evid means Kipshute, a lost sheep, a Yid, a Shefala that's lost, who davens to the Eibishter, Bakesh Avdecha, find me, bring me back. I didn't forget your mitzvahs. Which means I didn't forget at least one mitzvah. By one person it's Bris Milah, by another person it's Pesach, by a third person it's Chanukah, and by a fourth person it's Tzedakah. But mitzvah shachachti, no Jew has forgotten any mitzvah. And it's so powerful to think that David HaMelech, who as you journey through Kuf Yates, you encounter all kinds of things, his highs and his lows and his struggles inward, inside and outside. And at the end of the kapitel, the way we understood the Shin and the Tov, David is speaking on the highest levels of his avodah chalei shachachti. And it reminds me of the Chazal, which is brought in Tanya chapter 18, Perek Ches, that Pesi Yamin L'chol Dover Zeh Moshe. Who is the Pesi? Who is the fool who believes everything Zeh Moshe Rabbeinu? Pesi Yamin L'chol Dover Zeh Moshe. The end of that pasuk is Va'oram Yoven. A kluger da verstehen. Moshe Rabbeinu knows that Etzli is Barach HaKel Kipsayim. We're all fools. And that's the pnimius of this pasuk to Isi Keseh Evid Bakesh Avdecha. That the most connected Yid, when it comes to Atzmus Amhus, Dichalein is Keseh Evid. And he says to HaKadosh Baruch Hu Bakesh Avdecha Ki Mitzvah Shachachti. So for better or for worse, of course nobody's perfect and nothing is perfect. But I consider it a great schus that we had to learn Perek Kuf Yates from beginning to the end, every pasuk. We had a long introduction where we talked about the key words of the Perek, and then we learned every one of the oises of Aleph Beis. We dedicated 1 or 2 classes to each ois. In some cases, we needed more than one class for an ois. In one case, an ois kuf, we actually divided up into 2 sugyas, 2 different sugyas. We can cook in Vedic. The Shiurim, I have notes on the classes. You can see what each class discusses. And it's a great schus that we completed it. So now we're moving the Maimorim from the evening to the morning. Now I had pledged to myself that I would ease up my schedule a little bit. So in other words, I'd be teaching less rather than finding more work, because it's been really a crazy workload. But it's a week to Gimel. It's 10 days to Gimel Tammuz. Dafen trachten, was wir tun wegen der Ruf. We have to think what we're going to do when we get to Gimel Tammuz. Maybe I'll add another class in the evening which will be Gimel Tammuz prep, and we'll do the Maimorim in the morning. Perhaps we'll do it at the Tzava in the evening. Perhaps, we'll see. But right now we're learning a Maimer. And it's a delicious Maimer. It's really a wonderful Maimer. It's a delicious Maimer. It's a wonderful Maimer. It's one of those Maimorim which on the one hand is so easy to learn, and on the other hand is so deep and so endless in terms of its analysis and understanding it correctly. It's remarkable. On the surface, this Maimer is making a very simple point. It's an Avodah Maimer that's very rich, very geschmack, and very encouraging. On the other hand, this very same Maimer, as you read it and as you analyze its detail, you realize that you could learn it, and you could learn it, and you could learn it, and you could learn it. You can keep on learning the Maimer and never exhaust from learning the Maimer, because there's really so much in this Maimer. There's so much in this Maimer. And I intend to do the former and a little bit of the latter. It's very important for me that the oimek and the yesod and the ikir and the shoirish of this Maimer comes across. And then the philosophia, the haskalah, the details, and even the details that apply to avodah, if we get those to some extent, it's noch beser. But the key is that the chap, the nekude of this Maimer should come across. And I'm not, like I tell you, I'm terrible at suspense. I don't know how to keep it. Or I'm great at suspense. I don't keep it at all. I'm going to tell you the point of the Maimer up front. I'm not going to make you wait. I'm not going to make you guess. I'm not going to make you figure it out. I'll teach it to you straight up. Of course, Lani is daidi. The nekud of this Maimer is there's something called the avodah of keser. There's an avodah of hishtalshelus, and there's an avodah of keser, and they're very different. And to tell you the metaphor, the avodah of hishtalshelus is like steps, and the avodah of keser is the kevish, the ramp that they had to go up to the mizbeach. The mizbeach, we're not supposed to ascend with steps. We were supposed to ascend with a ramp. And inside this Maimer, in Perek Dalet, the Rebbe is going to bring this pasuk and explain al pi Chasidus what's the idea of steps and what's the idea of a ramp. In short, steps is the avodah of Mamala Kalalman, and the ramp is the avodah of Sevav Kalalman. And what's the chiddush of this Maimer? Normally, logic would dictate that you go from a lower level to a higher level. That the first avodah is steps, Mamala Kalam. And the culmination and the graduation of that would be kevish, the end. So the pasuk says, Leitalav Maus al Mizbechi. The Rebbe says the beginning of Avodas Hashem, the first step in Avodas Hashem is Mizbeach. And you don't start with steps, you start with a kevish. That's this Maimer. That when Yidden got the Torah from the Eibishter, they had to do an avodah to prepare them to get the Torah from the Eibishter. And the avodah that they did first, the first avodah that they did in order to get the Torah from the Eibishter is not an avodah of hishtalshelus, it's an avodah of keser. And the Rebbe is going to explain to us that when Yidden got, the Gemara says, Yidden got two ksorim, b'shor she'ekdimu Yisrael nasal nishma bo malachi hashoros, and kashalem shnei ksorim echad kineged nasa, the Yidden got ksorim, that crowns, for their avodah. So the Rebbe, the reason they got crowns is because they served Hashem on a level of a crown. And the level of a crown is an avodah of higher than hishtalshelus, which is connected to Sevav Kalalman. And this Maimer is going to explore what this means. Yidden got crowns for when they said Nasa v'Nishma. So the Maimer is going to say, why did they get crowns? Because they served Hashem on a level of crowns, and therefore they were given a reward of a crown. What is the level of a crown? The level of a crown is the avodah l'mayla miseidir hishtalshelus, avodah of keser. And the point of the Rebbe is you start with keser. You don't start with normal, you start with higher than normal. That's the nekud of the Maimer. That's the nekud of the Maimer. And the way the Maimer is going to develop is the avodah of a Yid is actually to serve Hashem in a gradual way, step by step. And the graduation, the culmination, the end of a life of a Yid is l'mayla me'ishtalshelus. But this Maimer teaches, don't wait till the end to get to Sevav Kalalman, start with Sevav Kalalman. In other words, the first thing you do is Sevav Kalalman, the last thing you're going to be rewarded with is Sevav Kalalman, and in between those two Sevav Kalalmans, you're going to have hishtalshelus, hadroga, steps. And Yidden got this sentiment. The Rebbe uses an expression in Yiddish. I'm just so excited about this Maimer. The Rebbe says in Yiddish, on page Kuf Samad, the very end. By the way, the PDF is up on the Facebook page. You can look for it. The last page is a Maimer. Zeh haben sich gechapt. I circled it. It's 8 lines from the bottom. Zeh haben sich gechapt. The Jews figured out on their own. In other words, to get the Teref Mebish, you start with Keser. You start L'mayla Miseder Ishtalshus. And then they got a schar of L'mayla Miseder Ishtalshus, and this allowed them to receive the Torah, and then, of course, then you go bring it into Ishtalshus, into steps. This is the Nakud of this Maimer. So let's learn. We're going to start from the beginning. And again, I apologize for not giving you a shiur on Friday. I'm giving you the shiur today. To be sure, the shiur will be a lot better because I prepared it Friday, and then when you have a day to let it sit, the Maimer comes out better. That's just the way it works. Heitan the Rebbe, and by the way, I numbered. You have the Maimer is 1 through 16. I put the numbers in the order of the Maimer, but I may jump around. I may not follow the pattern. If I do, you'll be able to navigate by the numbers, which means if you go to the Facebook page, and Mitzvah later today, I'll put up on my own website also the PDF of the Maimer, but it's up on the Facebook page, and you'll be able to follow the way I numbered the Maimer. I want you to forgive me for a second. I want to put the fan in a position where it will be more useful for me. And the Rebbe begins, B'sho she'egdimu Yisrael nasa l'nishma. The Gemara says that when the Jewish people said on Friday, Hey Sivan, nasa before Nishma, we will do and then we will hear. So we had last year, Tzeis Tafshin Yud Beis, yeah? Remember the Maimer, where the Rebbe talked about the 3 crowns, Hakdamas Nasa l'nishma. This crown, this Maimer doesn't go into the number of crowns. It simply speaks about the union of Hakdamas Nasa l'nishma. And we explained at length in that Maimer from Tafshin Yud Beis, the Pnimi is the inyan of Hakdamas Nasa l'nishma. So the Gemara says, Bo Shish Amri B'Shemalachi Asharis. 60 myriad, 600,000 angels of service came. Every single Jew. Now, if you read this superficially, it can sound like every Jew was visited by 600,000 malach. So you have to do 600,000 times 600,000. That's literally the taich. But l'chayda devar to 600,000 Jews because each one had 1 malach. And they tied for him 2 crowns. Echet keneged nasa, echet keneged nishma. 1 crown was the crown of we will do, and the other crown is the crown of we will hear. And of course, you know the Bavus Kasha, they didn't get the crowns for saying Nasa v'Nishma. They said the crowns for being Makdim Nasa v'Nishma, saying Nasa before Nishma. So then the Shaila becomes, why didn't they get 3? And of course, Chassidus answers that in the Medrash, in the Gemara it says 2, in the Medrash it says 3. And the 3rd crown, the Eibush didn't give us, the Eibush kept for himself, but they see with Shainis. So now the Rebbe goes straight to the point of this Maimer. V'hine Yadua, it is well known, Shekol ha'inyonim shaboyim el-mailo, whenever the Eibishter gives something to his world, it reflects what the world initiated, right? The Eibishter set up a system where we touch him and he reciprocates. Or he initiates and we reciprocate and then he reciprocates again. The only reason the system works is because he wants it to work. It's not like we have real value, real power, real significance. Whatever chashivas we have is, as Lashon for Chazal, achshavei. The Eibishter gave us a chashivas. Because otherwise we're nothing. And what we do is also nothing. The Eibishter gave a chashivas to our avodah. And he created a symbiosis, right? An interconnectedness. We act and he responds. He acts and we respond. And the way it works is that there's a relatedness between the avodah of a yid and what the Eibishter gives in return. Not that it has to be that way, not that it's fundamentally that way, but because the Eibishter set up his world in a way of isarusa de la tata, isarusa de la kvayochel, we touch him and he responds. So the Rebbe says usually when you see what a yid does, you know what schar he's going to get. Conversely, when you see what schar he's going to get, you know what avodah he did. So the Rebbe therefore says, moving as if understood, Sha'avoidas Hakdamas Nasa l'nishma, that the avodah, the spiritual service of man to God, in saying Nasa before Nishma is Shayach Linyan HaKeser, has to do with the level of Keser. Why? Because since we got Keser as a schar for Nasa v'Nishma, So Nasa v'Nishma has to be an avodah of Kesed. In other words, if you have, this is, but they do this in certain mathematical models. When you understand something well, and you don't understand another thing well, and you can correlate, you can show the constant between them, you can figure out one from the other. So in this case, since she gave us Ksodim, which is an in Kabbalah, and we understand what Kesed is, we can learn from the Kabbalah, from the Haskalah, what was the Avodah. Usually it goes the other way, right? You learn from the Avodah, the Haskalah. Here it goes Faket. We know what Kesed is. We know what the Schad that the Eibush of Yidden is crowns. So the Rebbe says, since we know what Kesed is, since we know the Avodah, the Schad that the Eibush gave Yidden, we can extrapolate back from what the Eibush gave us, what we did. If we got Kesed as a Schad, we did an Avodah of Kesed. So of course, right away becomes the question, so what is Kesed? Shtot HaKoi Kesed. What does Kesed mean? What is the Avodah of Kesed? And when we do the Avodah of Kesed, we'll get a Schar which is Kesed-like. Let's read it. Behine. Binyan HaKesed yesh beis pirushim. There's two translations to the idea of Kesed. Pirush HaAleph, the first translation of Kesed is Miloshon Seivev Umakif. It surrounds, it hovers. And it brings a pasuk, Mei Kisru es Binyamin, which of course is a pasuk in the famous tragedy of Pilegesh Begiva, in the end of Sefer Sheftim, that they surrounded this tribe of Binyamin. And then he brings the second pasuk, Rasha Machder Satzadik, the Rasha surrounds the Tzaddik. Of course, this goes on Klipa, that envelops the Tzaddik, if the Tzaddik allows him, Rachmana Litzlan. Shapirusha, that it connotes, Meloshan Seivev Umakiv, that it surrounds and that it hovers above. This is the same reason why physically a king who puts on himself a decoration which is symbolic of his kingship, we call that decoration a crown. Why do we call a decoration a crown? It embraces and it hovers above his head. So it's physically called a crown because it's spiritually the idea of a crown, which is the idea of Sevev Umakif. In other words, you have a king, right? You all know what a king is. A king is a human being that's empowered by the subjects to lead. They raise him up. The symbol of that lead position, the symbol of that aloofness is the crown. And the crown hovers on his head. It sits on top of his head. And it represents the fact that he's higher than all the other people. What's the relationship between the king and the crown itself? The king's relationship to the crown is that the king doesn't internalize the crown, that the crown sits above him. So the concept of a crown means above, therefore the king's adornment that represents his being king is called a crown. In other words, from the Nimshal we have the Mashal. The reason it is this way physically is because this is how it is in Teira and in Pnimiyas HaTeira Dieva Kesed. Now, you know and I know that it says in Tanya chapter 48 that the meaning of the word Kesed and the meaning of the word Makiv and the meaning of the word Sevev does not mean surround. Because surround is a spatial illusion, right? If you're sitting here, then what's here and here and here and here is around you. But if you don't exist in space, if we're not talking about a spatial illusion, a spatial context, a spatial reference, when you're not talking about space and space-related entities, you cannot explain a crown in spatial terms. Since we're talking in Ruchnius, not in Gashmius. Kesed is a Madregi in Kabbalah. And the Madregi in Kabbalah called Kesed does not exist in physical space and perhaps doesn't even exist in metaphysical space. No? If it doesn't exist in space, why is it called a crown? What is the connotation of surrounding and its association with Inyan HaKesed? So it says in Tanya that the word Kesed means Helam. The word Kesed means Helam. The word Makif and Sevev means Helam, that there's a light which is so potent and it's so strong that it cannot be revealed to you. You're not able to receive it. So it remains hidden from you. And that's the connotation of Kesed. The connotation of Kesed means, Sevev or Makif means, what a surrounding means, that it's way above you. So our Maimer is exploring what? Our Maimer wants to know the Avodah of Kesed. But in order to explain the Avodah of Kesed, it tells us what we already know, which is the Haskalah of Kesed. And right away, again, I said this before, you see how backwards this is. Normally in a Maimer Chassidus, you explain the Avodah, the way it is down here, and you use it to explain from that Lamaila. Here, this Maimer is Faket. How it is Lamaila, we know. And we want to explain from what we know how it is Lamaila, how it is Lamata. So Kesed means something which surrounds. And like I told you, that B'pnimiyas Ha'anyanim, surround doesn't mean spatially around you. It means above your cognition, above what you're able to internalize. Now I'm being bad, and if you look on page Kuf Samach, if you took at my sheet, you'll see I made 3 asterisks in the text, and he's talking about the avodah of Kesed there. And it's about a third from the bottom of the page. I don't want to get too caught up in this because I want to learn it later, but he says there's base timing. There's 2 reasons why a Kesed is called a Kesed. Number 1, because it's an Eir HaYeser Naila. It's an incredibly high light that the person's not able to internalize. And there's a second union of Kesed, and that is Gili Eir HaSeviv Hu Lamata Kamei Lamayla. It's everywhere the same. Kesed means hidden, but Kesed means universal. And the 2 are connected. When Hashem gives us a light of Kesed, which is infinite and beyond our ability to receive, and that's why we call it Seviv U'Makif. Seviv U'Makif means surrounding, literally. And Seviv U'Makif means hidden, metaphysically, spiritually. So later in the Maimed, the Rebbe explains 2 aspects for it. Number 1, the idea that it's an infinite light which is beyond what we're able to internalize. And number 2, v'gam zeh ikir, it's everywhere the same. It's in the highest worlds and the lowest worlds, it's the same. And this is one of the ideas. You don't have to go any place to get Kesed. It's just available here. It's just hidden, and you have to somehow access it. And this is the first taich of the word Kesed. And the Rebbe continues, Upirish Habeis. And then there's a second translation of the word Kesed. In addition to the translation that Kesed means surrounding, which I just told you means hidden, because it's infinite. And I just told you it's B'chol Mokum B'Shava. The second translation of the word Kesed in Lashon Sikhet means silence. And it brings the pasuk Kesed Li Ze'er, which is a pasuk in Iyov. And I did not look the pasuk up, but obviously, based on what the Rebbe says, it means be silent for a moment. Shepirushe, which means shetake, silent. V'hamten li'me'at, and pause. I think in some places they translate the word Kesed as hakov, hesitate. Here we translate it as sound. In the beginning of Hemshech Hayim Beis, B'shashak Dim Hayim Beis, he brings these 3 taichin. I wrote on the bottom of your page that in the beginning of Hayim Beis, the very first page, it speaks about 3 translations of Kesed. And then in Pei Kuf Chavav, at the end of Vayacha Yesef, then of Vayigash Ayin Gimel, he goes back to these 3 translations of Kesed. There's a lot of similarity between this Maimed and that Maimed, but here he only brings 2. Kesed means surround, and Kesed means quiet. Continues the Rebbe, and he says, these 2 translations of the word Kesed are interconnected. How so? It says in Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, every child knows this. Siag lachachma shsika. Siag means the fence for wisdom is silence. Right? We all know what a siag means. Asu siag latera. That if you have something of value, very important, and you want to protect it, so you make a fence, you make a gzeira, you add something extra, and this extra thing that you add protects the thing proper, right? What you're really interested in protecting is protected by the fence. Like the Chachamim made gzeiras derabanan, like on Shabbos they made gzeiras of muktzah, and memtzei heftecha, and v'dav v'dovar. All of these things, and amir l'nachri, all of these, what's called shvus, protects the lamites malachas, the reis. It's called asus yaglatei. The Torah is filled with such fences. So the pashat the taich in asus yaglatei is that you want to preserve the Torah itself, so you make a fence around it. So the Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos, Siag lachachma, you want to make a fence for wisdom. You want to do something to make sure that you should remain smart, or be'ikir, wise, keep quiet. Siag lachachma, the fence, the preservation of wisdom, that a person shouldn't become a fool and a superficial entity. The fence to remain intuitive and wise and deep is the ability to keep quiet. So Chassidus teaches Siag lachachma, the fence around chachma. That means what is higher than chachma, shsika. They translate it literally. Not Siag lachachma, the fence to preserve chachma, is silence. But what's higher than chachma? Silence. The Yamachadal says in the Mishnah, Pirkei Avos, Siag lachachma shesika, the fence to preserve wisdom is silence. Just like physically, what is a siag? It means a fence. That's a fence which embraces a certain area and a certain space in a certain area. Kach kam hashesika, the same is true of silence. Hisyag begeder umakif, it is a fence that acts as an embracer what is around. La chochma shireishes agilui. Chochma is the beginning of revelation. Chochma is the beginning of communication. Chochma is the beginning of acting in the real world. The syag to preserve the chochma, that the chochma should be as it's supposed to be, is shesika. In other words, the key to speaking correctly is keeping quiet before. Syag la chochma shesika. It's the crown which is above and hovers above chochma. So chochma is in from gilui. The syag la chochma, what's higher than chochma, that preserved the chochma, this is shesika. The pasuk is teaching us shalei. We shouldn't say that in chochma there's bringing down a revelation of everything. In other words, that when you go to hishtalshlus, which starts with chochma, when a person communicates using a form of communication which is communicable, it goes from the mashpia to the makabel. In a way of gilu, you shouldn't think that in a communication from a mashpia to a makabel there is everything. Elo yashne, but you should know that there remains inyan something shaleba begilu which cannot be revealed. It's the notion of silence. The diberu gilu is Allah say speech or the communication to somebody else, which of course is very, very important. However, silence is above this that can communicated through speech. And the Rebbe says it's above, it's higher than the madrega of wisdom. So let's talk about this for a moment. Let me start backwards, yeah? We all know the Rebbe the Rebbe is Mr. Communication. Zaya mashpia. If you could speak or be silent, speak. If you could say something and communicate something and share something and inspire something or be quiet, you should absolutely speak. So there's a famous story, it's a relatively famous story. I heard the story many years ago. I do not know the names of the people involved. It may have happened a dozen times, may have happened more than once, where the Rebbe was advocating to a certain individual that he should speak out about a certain issue. And he told the Rebbe that the Gemara says, Mili besela mashtuki betrei, that if a word is worth $1, then silence is worth 2. And he'd rather have silence, which is 2, or the expression is in the culture, silence is golden. So the Alter Rebbe said it's true that a word is worth $1 and silence is worth 2, but you can only be silent once. And you can speak many words. You have to speak, you have to communicate. Now, from a political angle, from a psychological political angle, every time you open up your mouth, you're committing yourself, right? You say something, can't take it back. You took a position, you have to support it. And if you have to take it back and say, I'm wrong, that's not very good for your public image and so on. So, anytime you open up your mouth, you're bound by once the words come out of your mouth, can't take them back. So it's cowardice in some cases. It's easier to not speak, because the minute that you speak, you commit. The Rebbe says we live in a time that every frum Jew has to speak. If we're going to save the Jewish people, and to be sure, if we're going to save the whole world, you didn't have to speak. You have to say what's on their mind and not be afraid. Now, the minute you open your mouth and say what's on your mind, then you got to defend it. And then you have to be consistent. You have to practice what you preach. You don't want to be a hypocrite. You're not allowed to be a hypocrite. But you got to speak. And then you have to deal with the effects, with the consequences of that speech. This is how the Rebbe approaches life, right? Every chance you have to say something, you should say, don't be quiet. I heard from my Eltern Mashpiyim of mine, Yidden that I worked with who were wiser and older than I am, they said, Daf reden. We live in a generation where you have to speak. But words never say everything. They can't. There's a depth which words cannot communicate. But we live in an age where speaking, communicating, producing words that are communicated to somebody else, which can help that other person, and their avodas Hashem are critically important. They're critically critical. Men darf reden, hein darf man reden, hein to talk darf man reden. In our generation, to keep quiet is a sin. A person has to open his mouth and say what's on his mind. You have to speak. So Chassidus says a klal gadol, as a classic rule. What you can say is not really what's going on inside. Your etzem, which is translated uselessly as your essence, or as I prefer to translate it, is the way you have a relationship with yourself cannot be communicated to somebody else. Gil, Agabi Azulas, if I'm speaking to somebody else, it's Helam Ha'atzmi, I'm hiding who I am in relationship with myself. On the other hand, if it's a Gili Ha'etzem, if I'm really saying what I am, it's Helam Agabi Azulas. One who communicates everything of what they are, communicates it through silence. And we all know the stories about how silence sometimes can be deafening. Like the Vart, you have to hear what the Hanukkah candles are saying. The Hanukkah candles are not saying anything. But you can hear them if you'll be quiet. The Maisa with the Rebbe and Rebbe Yachal Simpson, I've told it to you so many times, that the Rashag wanted very much that the Rebbe should participate in the Pesach Seder with him after the passing of the Rebbe's in the Chabadin, the Frierdiker Rebbe's wife. She passed away, Yud Tevis, Asar B'Tevis, Hashem Lamed Aleph, and the Rebbe was determined not to do it. So the Rashag asked the Rebbe if the Rebbe would continue this minig of having the Tzudas Yom Tov together. And the Rebbe said, Yom Tov Vil Mizayim Bazich, we'll be ourselves. Anyway, the Rashag pressed. He asked the Rebbe a number of times, and the Rebbe had respect for his older brother-in-law, but the Rebbe also knew that he was the Rebbe, and the older brother-in-law was the older brother-in-law. So the Rashag decided to bring pressure. He got other people to ask. One of the people that got to ask was Rabbi Simpson, Rabbi Eliyahu Simpson. He was be'emes a big chassid. He was a pneumistic chassid, Chabad chassid from the golden age of Chabad, right? Today Chabad Hasidus is about saving souls, which is the most important thing, but it's not the deepest. He was in Tamim and Lubavitch, and in Lubavitch he was a tzir. He was a real tzir. And he is famous for his silence. The man never said a word. A guy told me that he knew him well. He says, a favor, he'll give you his shirt to look up in the middle of the night to get you money for Gmos Chassid. Oh, but Avart, to get from him Epis Achasidis, it was like taking water from a stone. He was just mute. It was so much inside that it never came out. The Rashag asked Rabbi Simpson to go into the Rebbe and ask the Rebbe that he should spend Pesach with him. So Rabbi Simpson had a quandary. To ask the Rebbe was out of the question. He asked the Rebbe. The Rebbe said no. To deny that Rashag was hard for him. I think he was his boss. So he did the following. He walked into the Rebbe's room. He stood for a minute and walked out, didn't say a word. So he did what Rashag told him, and he didn't ask the Rebbe. Anyway, Rashag was by the Rebbe Mestame Erev Rosh Chodesh Nisan. The yeshiva used to go into the Rebbe every Erev Rosh Chodesh. He went to the Rebbe. And the Rashag asked the Rebbe, what's going to be Pesach? So the Rebbe told him, I already told you that Pesach Velim Mizayim Bazich. The Rebbe's not going to be alone on President Street. So the Rashag said, Ich hab doch geschickt Rabbi Simpson. I sent Rabbi Simpson. So the Rebbe answered, Bazeh Haloshen. Yeah, it is a rein. Und geschwiegen, aber a tiefem Schweig. He walked in, didn't say a word. But it was a very deep silence. Or in other words, the silence was deafening. He didn't say anything, it was incredibly intense. So the rule is, right, I was just giving you this Hagdama that we live in an age where you have to speak. But you can't say everything. Everything is available only in silence. And there are people who can communicate through silence. Two people sit in a room, no one says a word, and there's something real going on. But those are very deep souls. Shallow souls, and forgive me for saying blasphemy, American souls, the definition of the word American is a chitzen. The definition of the word American is a show. America is a show. That's what America's all about. A guy once told me, we don't make the best machines, but we're the best at selling them. America is a pretty face. America is a show. America is chitzenius, more than any culture ever. People have pointed this out to me, not only from Jews, not only Jews. America is all about a pretty face. A noise. That's why in America you have to make noise and draw attention to the Eibishter, to Torah, to mitzvahs. But as important as words are, they are shallow. Dibur is katas. And higher than words is silence. Not higher than words is silence because you're cowardly. Not higher than words is silence because you don't want to say a word because then you're going to have to defend it. Higher than words is silence because what I have to say cannot be put into words. And that's the second taisha of the word keser. So again, we live in an age when you have to speak. But at least with Davisin, we have to know that in truth, higher than words is a quiescence, is a depth which is communicated unverted with a silence. And that's the second taisha of keser, quiet. Says the Rebbe, v'nimtza kum teiset hazeh. Shebe'inyan siyag la'chochma. Shika, the one the Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos, that the fence around wisdom is silence, that means that it's higher than wisdom, it's more than wisdom. Wisdom is a form of communication. Understanding is for sure a form of communication, but even wisdom is a form of communication. And what is transcendent, what is higher even than the communication form or level of wisdom? Silence. Says the Rebbe, Yeshna Beis HaPerushim Dekesa Shesika V'Seviv. So, Sag L'Chochma Shesika includes two things. Sag L'Chochma Shesika obviously means higher than wisdom is silence. But Sag L'Chochma Shesika means what surrounds wisdom is silence, because they're both the same. So, the Rebbe just explained to us what is the meaning of the word Kesed, the way Chassidus explains it, right? Kesed, Kabbalah gives us levels, ideas. And Chassidus tries to give us a higoy and a havana in these ideas. So we're talking about the Kabbalistic idea of Kesed. We're not talking Kesed and Avodah. We're talking Kesed L'Mayla. The Kabbalistic idea of Kesed is explained in Chassidus by the word surrounding, which means hidden because it's transcendent of, and I already cheated and I told you that included in that is number one, a gili, which is higher than ishtalshus, and number two, a gili, which is become mokim, and the idea of silence, not silence because you're not saying anything, not silence because you're afraid to embarrass yourself, but silence because it's above words. That's Kesed and Haskalah. No? So now, what's Kesed and Avodah? Once you understand that Kesed and Haskalah means a revelation of Ein Sof, which is above limitation, and therefore it's hidden from the worlds, it's silent in relationship with the worlds. What is it in Avodah Sa'adam? What is Kesed and Avodah? And we'll understand what Kesed is in Avodah. We'll understand B'shah She'Gdimu Yisrael Nasa L'Nishma, and we'll therefore understand why the Schar for B'shah She'Gdimu Yisrael Nasa L'Nishma was Ksorim, because the Schar is Me'ein Avodah. Like the Rebbe says in the letter, the Kuntes and Yonah, Mischar Neida Mahus. V'ha'in Yin Ba'azeh. Says Rebbe, let me explain. The Klal is the way the Eibush created the world. Hashem made a contraction. He created an empty space. An empty space. Now, of course, any person who knows me and my classes, and I hope some of you know me a little bit, and I hope to get to know me better at InsideChassidus.org. Please visit and check it all out. You know that whenever you talk about the Tzimtzum Rishon, the thing which is missing in the equation that has to be emphasized, and it's tomorrow's Chitas, by the way, in Tanya, is the space itself. The premise of Tzimtzum assumes space. You can't have Tzimtzum from nowhere. Hashem is l'mayla min hamokim, Hashem is l'mayla min hazman. Hashem doesn't have time, Hashem doesn't have space, which is a brain twister. How could he exist without time and without space? He exists nowhere and in no way and in no time. He creates time and space. And then if there's time and space, that time and space could be filled with a lakus. That time and space can have the lakus evacuated from it. So you have an empty space, and to the empty space you can create a world. So the Kabbalah is the Eibush that created space. But the Kabbalah also is the Eibush that created space and time as it was a part of him. And therefore, after he created within himself, so to speak, proverbially speaking, time and space and matter as it's one with him, which is called in Kabbalah Ratzon, or it's called in Kabbalah Machshava, where the entire creation, including the time and space of the creation, are created as one with him, he evacuates himself. He goes away and leaves over that space. That act of going away, leaving over that space, is called Tzimtzum, or Dibur. Because Dibur means you project something outside of yourself. By Hashem, projecting something outside of himself is inverse. Why? We live in space. So for me to project something out of myself, I have to open my mouth. But Hashem doesn't have space, or all of space is him. So how can he project something outside of himself? By removing himself and leaving something alone where he isn't. And of course, then you go into the whole question of Tzimtzum Kipshute and Tzimtzum Shalei Kipshute, which is not a discussion for this Maimer. Once Hashem removes himself, now something is outside of him, at least from our angle, from our point of view, proverbially speaking. And that entity which is outside of him is now a mokim, a space separate from him, and it's therefore cholol, it's empty. And that empty space, Hashem creates worlds. So the Rebbe says the following. The call is Havas Heilemes, why they Tzimtzum mokim, for worlds to be created, Hashem has to create time and space within him, which is called Machshava, and then he has to evacuate himself from that time and space, which is called Tzimtzum, and leave over an empty space, in which he's going to create the worlds. This would be called B'Klolos. It's the first step in Dibur, Hashem going away and leaving something outside of himself, in which he creates the worlds. So the Rebbe says that Kabbalistically you're going to have two things. You're going to have the kav, the ruled line, the measured line, which is going to reinvest into this empty space, which is the proactive creation of the world. And you can have the Ein Sof that he evacuated in order to accommodate it. And this is going to be called eagle. It's going to be called a circle. Look inside. Well, and before the Eibishter evacuates the space, and his Ein Sof fills all of the space, the nature of the Ein Space that filled all of the space is called an eagle. So what happens is, Hashem has to create the space, but he creates the space as one with him, or one with his light. The space and time that he creates as one with him sits within the embrace of eagle, of Ein Sof, on a level which is called a circle, Kesed, which means surround and which means quiet, right? Surround because it's infinite, surround because it's everywhere the same, and quiet because it's so potent. That eagle is removed, and the space is left empty. And instead of that space being filled with an eagle, it's now filled with a kav, a ruled line, a measured line, which we call seder ishtalshlus, steps. And this ruled line allows for worlds to be. So the kesed, the seviv, is removed to create space for the kav, and the kesed is above it. Shehu, and this eagle agadol is a kesed kloli umakif kloli. It's the general crown, the general encompassing light. The klolos elam is for the worlds at large. She'eni ba begila be'elam is which cannot possibly be revealed in the world, because if they would be revealed in the worlds would cease to be. So Hashem removes the eagle, and then after he moves it, lagamri see, look lagamri, he brings down erin safar madreg of kaf, ma'ilo matapim zechsein zechtim aveicher, and so forth. The kaf is worlds. Says the Rebbe. This is the pshat that there's a crown above Chochmah, which is silence. Chochmah reish is Ishtalshlus. Chochmah, the beginning of Ishtalshlus. In other words, Chochmah would be the kav. What's above the kav? What's above Ishtalshlus? Hanamakav the Ishtalshlus. What embraces Ishtalshlus? It's Shesik is the silence, which is eagle. Agadlus of Niakav. It's Ein Sof in a level of eagle, infinite, and surrounding, which is Bechinas HaKesed. And Kesed means infinite, and Kesed means silent. Infinite because it's so potent, and silent because we're not kalim to receive it and to communicate it. Says the Rebbe, Klolosi the Matan Teda for the Eibusha to give us the Teda. And along with giving us the Teda, he gave us crowns. Therefore, Hachona Lamatan Teda Hagdamas Nasa Nishmu. Before we got the Teda and the crowns that came along with it, we had to say Nasa before Nishmu, which is a Kesed. It's the Kesed and Avoido, where she is Bayalakama. That's what this Maimed is about. This Maimer says, if we earned a crown, we worked a crown. What was the work? That's the Shaila. What work parallels the Schar of a Kesed? So the Rebbe says, let's explain what Kesed means. And that's what he did on this page. He explained to us the Kabbalah of Kesed. And what's the Kabbalah of Kesed? That it's higher than Seder Ishtalshlus. Now, I'm going to stop now. I'm not going to continue. I just read you one page. It took us 40 minutes, 45 minutes. I'm just going to say one thing, which is a segue, which is an introduction to the next year. And that is that the Rebbe is going to explain to us the idea that the first step in Avodas Hashem is Kesed. Even though it's the highest, it's the first. And then the Rebbe is going to tell us that the last step in Avodas Hashem is Kesed. You start with Kesed, you finish with Kesed, and in between you have Ishtalshalus. The Chiddush of the Maimed is that you start with Kesed. You don't wait. You don't say, first let me do a gradual Avodah, which is represented by steps. And then you culminate that, you graduate from that, you transcend that through an Avodah, which is called a crown. But the first step on Avodah is a crown, the final step of Avodah is a crown. In between the two, you have Ishtalshalus. And that's the Chiddush. Yidden started the relationship to Eibishter with a Kesed. Now it's going to get a little bit complicated. In other words, there's going to be things that will be a little bit hard to understand, because he's going to say that the Kesed in the beginning is Yitzias Mitzrayim, the Kesed in the end is Akdamas Nasal and Nishma, and in between is Sfira Seven, that would be the Kav, that would be Ishtalshalus. But compared to after Matan Torah, it seems that all of this is Kesed. The Yidden's preparation to relate to Hashem was in a way of a crown. And that's what they got, a schar of a crown. That was going to connect it to davening, very sweet. And the way the Maimah is going to be structured is at the beginning of Avodah is Kesed, the end of Avodah is Kesed, in the middle you have Ishtalshalus. And like I said, it's going to get complicated. And the Rebbe's message is going to be that the avodah which got us the Torah was the avodah of Kesed, which is higher than Seder Ishtasos. And we will continue. The way it stands now, the next show will be tomorrow morning at 10:30 Mitzvah Hashem. Mornings will be dedicated to my Modim. And we'll see what else happens. I may decide even today to start Vata Tetzav. I probably should.